My name is Fazlullah Sadiq and I make videos on English related informative videos. I also share my motivational videos and as well as my personal blog. So if you are new to my channel, I would request you to please subscribe my channel because your single click can really boost up my energy for making more videos like this for you.
So as you can see, the basic components of communication process are sender, encoding, message, channel, decoding, receiver or recipient, and feedback. There is another, you can say, component that has not been added here before, you can say before I started recording this lecture, and that is eighth, which is context. So these are different components of communication process. Now, as I said earlier in the previous lectures, that communication is a two-way process, and sending information is, a one-way process. We send information, and that is then received and understood, and then that is responded in the form of feedback. So information flows one way, and the whole communication process is two-way. It's a two-way traffic. Now, before beginning, the lecture, today's lecture, let us see the diagram of communication process. As you can see, there is a source, the sender, who encodes a message. He transmits an idea he transforms an idea into a message, and then he selects a channel, a medium. You can say this is mode of transmission, a medium through which he has to send that message, and that message is then, you can say, received and decoded, you can say deciphered once again, reinterpreted. The idea or the meaning out of that message is once again derived by the recipient. So receiver or recipient, and the recipient or receiver then, after understanding the message, gives feedback or response in the form of a message, in the form of a reply to recipient, to the sender, to the source, in the same context, keeping in view the context in which the message has been initiated. So these are different components of communication process, and sometimes it also happens that this channel which is being selected, the medium which is being selected for sending a message by the sender, is often obstructed by, it is often hindered by barriers. So this is again another topic, barriers or problems of communication. We'll discuss it in another class, but let us see today what these different components are and how they play their role in the communication process. So as far as the first component of communication process is concerned, it is known as sender or the source. So the sender is the person who has an idea in the form of a message. It is the sender who conceives an idea, who wants to deliver that idea, share that idea, communicate that idea with another person. So the person who has an idea in the form of a message is simply known as sender. Now, to establish yourself as an effective communicator, you must first establish your credibility. As a credible sender, you should, you can say, work honestly. You should, you can say, communicate wholeheartedly with other individuals, so that every piece of information that is needed by the other person, the recipient, is delivered to him completely. So in this regard, you should be very much honest in sharing the required data, the required information in the form of a message. In this regard, you should always, as a sender, you should always display knowledge of the subject, the audience, and the context in which the message is delivered. Now, there are three things that are mentioned in this, you can say, statement, and that is, you must always, as a good communicator, as a good and effective communicator, you should always display knowledge of the subject. You should always elaborate this idea, this thing, that you know the subject well on which you are sending the message, and the topic on which you are actually, you can say, exchanging information with someone is very much clear to you. And you should also, consider the audience. You should know the audience, who the audience is, who the reader is, who is the recipient of that message, and what is his, you can say, status and rank in the organization to whom you are going to send a message. What is his knowledge level? How much information does he require that you are going to organize in the form of a message, and which you will then deliver it to him. So this is the second component of this, you can say, statement. And the third is that you should also have a good command at the context in which you should be well aware of the context in which the message is going to be delivered. Context is the setting, the situation in which, you can say, you are going to compose a message and deliver it to the recipient. So these are three important things that, you can say, are very much necessary for a sender to consider them well in advance before composing a message. And failure to understand who you are communicating with will result in delivering messages that are misunderstood. If you neglect considering your audience, if you, you can say, ignore who your reader, your recipient of the message is, so that will cause, you can say, misunderstanding, that will cause a problem, that will cause, you can say, so many other issues, and the message will not be properly, you can say, conceived as well as understood by the recipient. So the second component, as you can see, is encoding, right? So this is actually, encoding is defined as the process of how the mind converts an idea into words in both oral and written form. So as far as encoding is concerned, this is a process, during which our mind converts that abstract idea which is there in our mind, in the mind of the sender, and that abstract idea is given a concrete form, a concrete shape, in the form of words, in the form of numbers, in the form of diagrams, in the form of pictures, in the form of, you can say, non-verbal signals too. So this is a kind of, you can say, a process in which the sender converts an abstract idea which has previously no shape, no form, and no structure, and that idea is then converted into words, into symbols, into numbers, into, non-verbal signals, into both words as well as, you can say, written words as well as oral words. So this is called encoding. And it is also defined as transforming an abstract idea into a communicable message by the use of words, symbols, pictures, and sounds. So this is very much clear because I explained it earlier. And as far as its examples are concerned, for encoding process, you choose language. Idea is there in your mind. For example, if I say ball, so ball is something that is there in my mind, and I express the idea of, of ball by using words, by using letters. So this is how you encode a message. This is how you give another shape to the idea that you have in the form of words. And an angry or soft voice, harsh tone or courteous tone, these are also part of, you can say, encoding. When you are encoding a message, remember that not only your words, but your voice, if it is, you can say, oral communication, your voice and your tone also becomes part of encoding process. So if you are angry, um, if you are angry, your voice is, angrier. The tone is clearly visible in your voice, in your words. And if you are, for example, harsh, so that tone is clearly visible both in your written words or in your spoken words. So same is the case with courteous tone as well. So not only contents are, you can say, you can say not only contents are uh, dressed in the form of words, contents of those ideas that are there in your mind, not only they are dressed in the form of letters, in the form of words, but your tone too. So always be careful when you start encoding a message, because you are not only delivering spoken words, or written words, you're also delivering a tone that might be angrier tone, that might be, a harsh tone. So be very careful when you encode a message. And the third component of a communication process is message. It is the idea, the information, or opinion that the sender conceives. The sender has got an idea in the form of an information, in the form of an opinion, and he or she, uh, you know, uh, understands that idea. He encodes it, right? Gives it a proper shape in the form of verbal or non-verbal message, and that message is actually composed of ideas, information, opinion, which comes out from the mind of the sender. So always think over the contents and emotional aspect of the message before sharing it. As I said earlier, it is very much important to consider both contents and emotional aspect of the message before sharing it, because most of the time we are not aware, we are not conscious of the matter that we are sharing, not only a message which contains data, which contains information, but they also, carry emotional aspects of the message as well. So emotional aspects, as discussed earlier, could be your tone. That could be a harsh tone. That could be, um, a pleasant tone. So be very careful about it before sending a message. And the message can be written, oral, and nonverbal, uh, in the form of nonverbal communication. And they that are all, you can say, uh, shared by the sender. And uh, they all these types, all these forms of, you can say, communication, written, oral, or nonverbal, they are all affected by the sender's tone. You can say because tone is, equally part of that message. So it plays an important role in the communication process. And uh, all these forms of communication, written, oral, and nonverbal communications, are affected by the sender's tone. method of organization, the way you organize a message, validity of the argument, how valid the argument that you have, shared in a message is, and what is communicated and what is left out. All these things are very much necessary when you start, composing a message that you need to, you can say, exchange or share or deliver to someone else. There are certain things that you need to leave out because you don't think that they are appropriate, you don't think that they are relevant to the topic on which you have composed a message. So these are all those issues that are important to be considered related to the component message. And the fourth component of communication process is channel. Now, channel is a term that refers to the medium that carries the message from sender to the receiver. It is the medium, the mode of transmission that you can say an individual, a sender, chooses to carry that message which he has composed to the sender, from the sender to the recipient. So it's a mode of transmission. Verbal include, there are various channels like verbal channels. For example, for verbal message, you use the channel of face-to-face meetings. You can also use the channel, the medium of telephone to carry your message from one point to the other. You can also use the channel of using letters, emails, memorandums, and reports. So these are different channels for you can say for transmitting a verbal message, right? And all these different channels have their own strengths and their own weaknesses. For example, if you want to send, you can say, if you want to send a message at a high speed, you can use email, electronic mail system that can be used for that. And if you want to, you can say, keep the secrecy of the message, you can use letter, right? And if you want to, you can say, if you want to have an immediate feedback from your recipients, so you can hold a meeting, a conference, where you can receive, you can say, an immediate feedback from your recipient. So cost, urgency, and there are other several factors that are kept in mind while choosing a channel. And as I said earlier, different channels have different strengths and different weaknesses. So it is not particularly effective to give a long list of directions verbally. If you want to give directions to someone, to the recipient, so it is not good that you should, you can say, give long directions verbally, orally. Instead, that should be, you can say, communicated in the form of, you can say, a notice, an office order, let's suppose. And if you want to, and sometimes it also happens that, if suppose you send, you can say, you can say, if you, for example, if you send an explanation to someone by you can say in the written form, so that will quickly cause problems, and because you directly criticize someone through a letter. So that is, as I said earlier, different channels have different strengths and weaknesses. Every channel, before choosing a channel, you must consider its different factors, like cost, urgency, and you can say its secrecy as well. Keeping in view these different factors, you may choose appropriate channel that is suitable to both sender and recipient. Now, the fifth component of communication process is decoding. Decoding is actually deciphering the meaning from verbal and non-verbal message. The message that is received either verbally or non-verbally, that verbal or non-verbal message is then, you can say, decoded, it is deciphered, and the meaning is, you can say, derived out of it. It is interpreted. In other words, you can say that decoding is the process of interpreting the message, so as so that the meaning that is there in the form of words, in the form of non-verbal signals, that is derived out of it and understood. So when the receiver views or hears the message, so it means they are actually doing decoding. They do what is usually termed as decoding, and decoding can be defined as the receiver interpreting the message and coming to an understanding about what the source is communicating, what the sender is communicating. So this is interpretation, in other words, interpretation of the message by the recipient. Now, the sixth component of communication process is receiver or recipient. The receiver can be a reader as well as your listener, audience. And a receiver can be a single individual, and a receiver can be group of individuals. So a receiver is the person who receives the message. Receiver is also called recipient, and it is receiver or recipient who decodes the message. And receiver could be an individual, a single person. A receiver could also be a group of individuals. I mean to say that a message is not only sent to a single individual. It is not only shared with in most cases, it is not only shared with a single individual. It is often shared with group of individuals, with a number of employees of the same organization. So you should keep this thing in mind, that your receiver can be either a single person or group of individuals. So the recipient could be, the receiver could be the listener, the reader, or the observer. So these are different roles of recipient. Either he could be a listener in one-on-one conversation or in a meeting, for example, and the receiver could be the reader too, because if you send him a written message in the form of an email or a letter, so he will be reading it. And he could also be observer, the observer as well. For example, you have invited him for a meeting, you have called him for a meeting, and he is silently observing you. So he will be observing your both verbal and non-verbal communication. So, and it is a recipient or receiver who decodes, interprets the message with as little distortion as possible, because it is important for the recipient to understand the message completely. So in this regard, he decodes it, he interprets it with as little distortion as possible, because he has to derive the exact meaning which has been put into words, words and into non-verbal signals by the sender. So understanding that message is very important for the recipient. So that is why he decodes or interprets the message and tries to understand the message completely, so as to make the communication process more effective. Well, the next component of communication process is context. And contexts, as far as context is concerned, it refers to the setting in which communication takes place. And it is the context due to which we establish meaning, and we can influence what is said and how it is said. So understanding context of the message in which it has been uh, prepared, in which it has been composed, that is very much necessary. And context is there within the message. You might have been, you can say, orally briefed by your chief executive officer or your boss about a certain issue to write a report on it. So keeping in view that brief, uh, in which you have been, you can say, uh, directed to prepare a report. So keeping in view that brief, that context, the situation, the setting about an issue, you will have to prepare your feedback as recipient. So the context helps establish meaning, and it can also influence what is said and how it is said. So communication is influenced by the context, and most of the time you can say uh, the communication that takes place between the sender and the recipient is influenced by a single context. And keeping in view that context, they interact with one another, they exchange information with one another. So context can be there can be variety of contexts, like physical context, social context, chronological context, and cultural context. Let us see different examples of these contexts that have been mentioned here under context. So uh, in boss office, for example, in workplace, over lunch, in a picnic place, the same topic, issue could be discussed differently. So this is usually a physical context. And then there is social context as well. For example, between friends, if an issue is discussed, if they talk on a certain issue, for example, between people with strained relations, between two persons, one on one, when people around. So this is a social context, like you are surrounded by your friends. The issue which you are actually addressing, which you are addressing in the form of a message, has social context in it. When you talk about an issue between friends, a quarrel, for example, a quarrel between friends, a quarrel between people with strained relations, when the relationship between them is not good. So between two persons, one on one. So these are different social contexts, right? And then there could be chronological context as well, like time influences different situations, early morning, at the end of the day's work, busy day, for example. So these are, different chronological contexts in which an issue can be, you can say, addressed in the form of a message. Then there are cultural contexts as well, organizational. There is a culture in an organization too. So there is a culture in society as well, ethnic issues, national background, people speaking the same language, coming from the known areas, gender biases, etc. So these are all different cultural contexts. If you talk about any of these areas in the form of a message, so it means the context that you have chosen for your message is cultural context. And uh, the next component of communication process is feedback. Feedback is usually the response, the reply of the recipient or receiver. Your receiver will provide you with feedback, which could be either verbal or non-verbal or both, and which will be the reactions to your message, to your message that you have communicated. A response is actually the reaction, the reply or the response on part of the recipient. So you should pay close attention to the feedback of the recipient, because it plays a crucial role to ensure that the audience have understood the message or not. And as I said earlier, paying close attention to the feedback is necessary, because that will tell you whether the message was properly interpreted and understood by the recipient or not. So the success of your message depends on feedback of the recipient. And that is end of today's lecture. Thank you very much. Our next lecture will be on problems or barriers of communication. So see you in the next lecture. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.